Welcome to the Dice Tower Spring Spectacular, featuring top 10s, live plays, contests, and more.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom Vassell, and welcome back to day 2 of the Dice Tower Spring Spectacular, where we're playing games live. We're talking about games live and having, hopefully, with all of you, a lot of fun. We got all kinds of contests and stuff going on today, too, so stay tuned. Those contests will happen later. All right, folks, well, we're going to get started today, jumping right into the Dice Tower Award nominations. So this is the 14th Annual Gaming Awards from the Dice Tower, honoring the best games from 2020. This is a committee of sorts, and as we go through this, if you have any particular questions about the awards, you can ask them. I may answer them, I may not, because I may actually cover it in my overviews. But we have 15 different categories. We're going to go through those categories and talk about the 5 games that were nominated in each one, or not talk about them, but present them to you, except for Game of the Year, in which case we have 10 games that were nominated for that one. We have a committee where we get together and talk about Dice Tower Awards. This committee is made up of all the different people involved in the Dice Tower, as well as other podcasters, content creators, video people, anyone who wants to be involved, who's involved in the board gaming industry, from the content creation side to reviewer side of things. We get together at the beginning of each year. We talk about games that are nominated. We make a long list of games, and then we vote on those and narrow them down to 5. Later on, at our Dice Tower Summer Spectacular, we will be announcing the winners. That gives us a good chunk of time between now and July to play these 5 games, and everyone can play them and then have an opinion on them, whether they're the best or not. But I'll tell you what, folks, I personally think that the nomination lists are more important than the actual winner, because these are great lists. You can sit there and say, hey, these are 5 good games. Any of them work for me. Any of them are worth getting. I'm very proud to present these. Now, another thing that's important to notice, I say this every year, I don't personally, I don't vote on these awards. I would only break a tie. I broke 1 tie in the nominations. That was it. I wear ties and break them. But I don't actually vote. These are not Tom Vassell's opinions. These are the opinions of a very widely diverse group of people. So there you go. Why are my hands orange? They don't look orange to me. So let's get going here. We're going to start with our first category, which is welcoming games. So welcoming games is a reworking of a, we talked about this before, we called them family games. But Z coined the phrase welcoming games, and I like it better. These are games that are good for folks, maybe if you're starting out in a hobby, or even if you're not starting out in a hobby. They're just games that anybody can play. So let's take a look at the nominations for welcoming games. And there you go, folks, your 5 nominations for welcoming games. Once again, these are games that you can introduce people to, the kind of games that if someone comes to my house and says, what's that game? I'm like, hey, let's play it together. All right, so that's our welcoming games category. Let's take a look now at party games. Party games, of course, is a category which is always a little, what exactly is a party game? And really the best definition we can come to is these are the kind of games I might play at a party, or that give you a party game feeling. So here we go, our 5 nominations for Best Party Game. There you go. I often think that this is an overlooked category, the party games, especially amongst gamers, such as maybe the folks who are watching this and myself, and we tend to forget that these games are out there and they don't get as much love, but I think that they should. So those are our 5 nominees for Best Party Game. All right, Best Two-Player Game. Hey, you only have one person to play against. These are the games that we suggest to play with that person. Now, this does not mean the game is only 2 players, although it could. It just means that we think if you have 2 people, this is an excellent game to play with those 2 people. What are these 5 excellent games, you might ask? Here we go. One of the things that happens when we talk about these awards, as an aside here, is people say, well, where's this game in particular? Many times those games were nominated in a previous year. You only pick games that came out in the year 2020, and we try to go by actual coming out, as in the game had an actual English release and it came out in that year. So sometimes a game came out at the very beginning of the year. Isle of Cats is a good example of that. And sometimes it didn't come out by the end of the year. Maybe a few reviewers had copies, but we just pushed those to the next year. So there's kind of some leeway in there, but we as a group decide those different things. All right, so 2-player games, that's what those are. Let's take a look now at one of my favorite categories, a category that's really popular these days, and that is cooperative games. Games where you play together as a group against the game, against a bad guy, and you're just trying to win together. Here we go with our nominations. This category, like I said, always makes me happy. I found that, it's interesting. Earlier we talked about welcoming games. Cooperative games often are the same thing. They're an easy game to teach people because you can say, hey, play this with me. We're on the same team. I'm not going to try to sneakily beat you in this game. We can play the game together. So, incidentally, Marvel United, we're actually playing the new version of that at 10 o'clock, the X-Men version. All right, so that's cooperative games. Now let's talk about best game from a new designer. Now, the way that we do new designers is we say, is it their first or second published game? And of course, is it their first and second published game as of the year we're looking at? So someone may have designed their second game in 2020, and they may have 3 games coming out in 2021. Well, whatever. In 2020, they were a new designer. So we're taking a look at the best games from a new designer, either their first or second published game. Here they are. Oh, we're live. Sorry. Welcome back, everybody. I got caught up reading the comments here. Anyhow, folks, as an aside here, some games are not going to be possible in different categories because they're reprints, and we have a reprint category, and reprints cannot win in other categories because we're trying to spotlight new games, and we don't want, when Ticket to Ride came out, we didn't want Ticket to Ride to win 6 years in a row for Ticket to Ride Europe, etc. So that's where that is. All right. Now we're talking about small publishers. This means that in the year 2020, this publisher had 5 or less published games. And we're picking one. Sometimes these games get picked up by a bigger publisher, but we're talking about the main publisher, or at least the first publisher of the game. So here are the nominations for best games from a small publisher. All right, so just as a small note there, you're wondering what that big box with an L on, that's Project L. So there you go, the nominations for games from a small publisher. All right, our next category is Best Artwork. Now, one of the things I like when we talk about artwork for games, because I think games these days are absolutely gorgeous, not all of them, but many of them are. This has nothing to do with whether the game is good or not. Whether I like a game or not, I need to be able to take a look at the art and say, this art is good, this art is not so good. Obviously a very subjective award, but I hope that you find these games to be pretty. Here are the nominations for the best artwork of 2020. I personally think that this is a very difficult category these days. It used to be easier because there would be 3 or 4 games that came out over a year that you're like, those are great, those are gorgeous. But nowadays there are tons of fantastic, gorgeous games. So there you go. All right. Well, moving on from art, we'll jump to production. This includes everything else. It includes the graphic design, if it has miniatures, the miniatures in the game, or the wooden pieces of the game, the overall production value of a game, and we kind of superimposes over the price of a game. So a game that's really expensive might have amazing components, but a game that's a medium-sized game might have really amazing components for the price there. Well, let's find out. Here are the nominations for Best Productions of 2020. Any one of those games would have won 10 years ago. You know, how far we have come as a industry where games look and as gorgeous as they play these days. And, you know, I think we can say that these games, even though they look gorgeous, also many people find them incredibly fun to play. All right, let's jump now to the innovative game category, the most innovative game. Now this one's a little trickier when we talk about innovative because there's only a few games in the history of gaming that are like, wow, this game changed gaming forever. But there's a lot of smaller steps, a lot of, well, this game did this did this. So we look for games that do something different or do something that we've seen before but in a different style of way. Games that feel different than the other games that are out there. So here's the nominations for most innovative games of 2020. Okay, so there you go, your most innovative games. Let's take a look now at a category which has become near and dear to many people's hearts, especially in the year 2020, where this particular category exploded, and that's Best Solo Game. And this doesn't mean the game is only solo, although that's possible. It just means that this game has a really good solo mode. So if you don't have many people to play with, or you just like playing games by yourself, these are the games for you. Here we go. Well, I need to get on the ball. I've only played one of those games myself solo, but I'm sure they're all good. I think Mike has played all of those solo. So speaking of which, Mike is doing his top solo games of all time. So keep an eye out. That's happening in just a bit from him. So, all right, let's continue on here from solo games. We're now taking a look at the best reprint. Reprint, reworking, redone version. This is a tough category, folks, because the number of games that have had a new version, a new reprint, and we're not talking about just a second printing of a game. It has to have changed something, whether it's the art, the box, sometimes whole mechanisms change. So these are the best reprint style games from 2020. Now, some of you may be wondering where different games are. I will say that there's always the possibility in the Dice Tower Awards when they come out that there will be special awards given to particular games that may not have fit in any other category. So stay tuned on that one. Alrighty, let's talk about now the best expansions. You love a game, you want to play more of it. So you buy the expansion, get some more stuff. These are the 5 best expansions, in our opinion, of 2020. Okay, so there you go. Best expansions. And yes, one of them is a standalone expansion, but that still counts as an expansion. So there you have it. Let's now take a look at one of my favorite categories, and that is all about theming. Now, this can be a couple things. One, we might say, hey, the theme is unique. This is an interesting theme we haven't seen before. Or it could be, hey, this theme is integrated into the mechanisms of the game really well. I'm a big sucker for new, interesting, or just well-done themes. Here's the nominations for 2020. Alrighty, so very unique. What a diverse. You know, we got an IP, butterflies, an out of existence airline, pirates, and pinball for our different themes that we have there. All right, now on the other side of things, theming alone does not make a game. So we're looking for strategic games. You want those games that give you lots of strategy? These are the ones to look at. Here are the top nominees for Best Strategy Games of 2020. And there you go. You want some strategy? Those are the games to check out. And now, here we are, the final game of the year. There's no like real any kind of criteria here. What games do we think are the best of the year? So we don't have a slide for game of the year. In this particular category, we do 10 because I want to have a nice slate of games. 10 different games to play that hopefully meet a variety. You may look at one and go, I don't like that game, but hopefully there's one on these 10, and I think these are 10 games worthy of being added to people's collections. Are you ready? Here we go. The 10 nominations for Best Game of 2020. And there you go, folks, your 10 nominations for Best Game of the Year. So the committee is now going to play all these games. We're going to talk about them and go through them, and we'll be voting on them in a few months and announcing the winners during the Dice Tower Summer Spectacular, which is happening the second week of July. So we look forward to talking to you all during that point in time. All right, before we move on here, we have a few minutes. If anyone has any questions, and well, I'll answer any questions that you might have, but I can't necessarily speak to the committee's preferences as to what they picked. Remember, I don't vote on these myself, although I'm always very content with what comes out. I may disagree and be like, I would have put this game and then that, but that's precisely the reason I do this, because I already did my top 10 of the last year. You can go watch it online, you know, but that's not the same as getting a consensus there. So if you have any quick questions about how the Dice Tower Awards work or the nominations, while I'm waiting for those, I would say that we will have a list of these online for you to look at. That will go up sometime over the course of today. Think of maybe later today or maybe tomorrow, and that's easy to find. You just go to dicetowerawards.com. I'm getting a lot of questions about Jaws of the Lion. Don't worry, we're not snubbing Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, I promise. Why was DoorDash snubbed? Well, I don't even believe it was suggested by anybody here. Jaws of the Lion is not on the top 10 games of the year because it is basically just a continuation of Gloomhaven. It does it in a different way, but it's the exact same game with the most minor of changes. That's why it's not nominated on any of these. But again, for those of you who love the game, do not worry come time for the awards. And I'm not getting any particular questions here about anything, so alrighty, people were just talking about different things. And again, not every game can make it. Like a game might have made it as number 6 on one of these nomination lists. So either way, spread the word, tell people about these. But now we're going to jump into another part of our Spring Spectacular here. We're going to continue on Mike DiLisio. What's the matter?
I don't see it in it. It's just the outro.
Oh, do we not have it ready to go?
Nope.
All right, well, I'll just talk to the crowd for a second here. Is there any way to load it up? All righty, well, let me see what other questions we have here for a second here. No. Okay, so someone asked about the Razzies type thing. I don't particularly like doing that. Don't get me wrong. We will elbow drop a game. We'll tell you if a game is bad. We're not, we have no problem talking about games that we don't think are fantastic. But I don't want to I feel like an award for bad games is not a particularly good thing to do. It just seems like that's unnecessarily cruel. We might, and we have occasionally in the past, done top 10 worst games, top 10 bad games, but not a huge fan of that sort of thing. We're good now? All righty. Here we go. So we're jumping back now to Mike's top 50 games of all time. Yesterday we did 50 through 41. We're going to show you 40 to 31 in just a second. After that, we're going to take a short break, not a very long break, and we'll be back at 10 with X-Men Marvel United, a preview of that game, and a few more things. So lots more stuff coming today. Let's go to Mike.
Mike DiLisio, bravissimo, sporadically bored, but never pianissimo. He's got less shame on his shelf. Pulls down a game, plays it by himself. Mike DiLisio's top 50 solo games.
Hey there everybody, it's Mike DiLisio and I'm back with the next installment of my top 50 solo games of all time here on the Dice Tower Spring Spectacular 2021. Well, now we're going through numbers 40 through 31. Some great games on the list, so let's go ahead and get started with number 40. My number 40 is Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden, a really, really quirky little game where you are trying to win a Best Garden trophy. And you're doing this by, obviously, planting a garden. But you've got some nosy and pesky neighbors who are causing you issues. It's got this really, really, I would say divisive, but I love the art. It's odd. It's certainly not kind of standard art that you'll see in a board game. I happen to like it quite a bit. It's a great little spatial puzzle. Again, it's something that I think you'll see a lot in these lists are games that have a puzzle element, really good for solo gaming. And Mr. Cabbage Head's Garden is a satisfying puzzle, quick to play, I think endearing art, some nice scoring opportunities, a really cool game that I don't know a lot of people have checked out, but you should check out Mr. Cabbage Head's Garden. Number 39 is a cooperative game called Endangered. And as you might guess from the name, this is about trying to protect endangered species of animals. And depending on which animal you're trying to save, you're going to have some different objectives that you're having to do, and maybe different sides of a two-sided map that you play on. But the core of the game is that you are playing as a couple of different characters that have their own unique abilities, something that is common in cooperative games. And you are trying to keep these animals alive from whatever issues may be happening, environmental or otherwise. And so you are doing this essentially by placing dice as workers out on action spots. But one of the things that's so cool about the game is that you have a hand of cards, and some of your cards are new action spots that you can play out. And you have to play these dice in following particular rules based on the value of the dice. It's a great theme, a really nice puzzle, challenging without feeling unfair. I like the fact that the different animals will play out differently, and they're coming out with more and more animals. They already are getting ready to fulfill a new Kickstarter. Animals. Endangered was one of these games that kind of came out of nowhere to me, and it just charmed me. I really like it a lot. That is Endangered. At number 38 is Calico. This is another charming game where you are trying to create the most beautiful quilt to attract cats to come lay on the quilt. Come on, gotta love that theme, right? I mean, maybe you don't. There are some people out there that don't love cats. I don't get it, but there are some people. Calico is a puzzle game at heart. And what you're doing is you are drafting tiles to place onto your individual player board, which is going to be your quilt. And depending upon different scoring objectives, trying to place these tiles in particular ways to score the best. And the tiles are going to have patterns and they're going to have colors. And so you usually are trying to place these tiles in such a way that they are fulfilling one or more of these scoring conditions. And it can be agonizing, these decisions. There's not a lot mechanically that you're doing. You're drafting a tile and you're placing it down. But within those simple mechanics are some just really, really agonizing decisions. This is one of those games where you're just like, oh, what do I do? There's so many things I want to do. Do I take this tile and put it here now where I know I'm going to get some kind of scoring, but maybe not the best? Or do I hold off and kind of push my luck and hope that the perfect tile comes out? It's a beautiful production, gorgeous art, I think an endearing theme, a nice little puzzle. That is Calico. Number 37 is Tapestry. Tapestry is a civilization-themed game where you are trying to advance in one of 4 different tracks. And I say civilization-themed game because it maybe doesn't have the classic elements of what people consider in a civilization game. But to me, it's a great Euro, and I love the theme, so I don't care whether it's really a civilization game or not. It has a very, very challenging solo opponent that you play against that is run with a deck of cards, an Automa deck. The designers of the solo variant are known as the Automa Factory. They've kind of championed, if not created, this card-based AI system. And in Tapestry, you are playing as a unique civilization that has its own kind of special power. You've got a central map that's going to be made up of different tiles that you lay out. But the real central conceit are these 4 tracks that go around the side of the board, and they all are going to trigger different abilities. And what you're trying to do is advance in one or more of these tracks to gain the most points at the end of the game. You have this very challenging AI opponent that you're going against with easily scalable difficulty. I really think that Tapestry is a great achievement in solo gaming because it's one of those games that I think 10 years ago, there's no way they would have even tried to make this a solo game. But now, games that you would not have thought could be are becoming viable and challenging solo games. Tapestry is a lot of fun. Check it out. Number 36 is Wildlands: The Ancients. Now, Wildlands itself is a tactical skirmish game, and it was not a solo game out of the box. The Ancients is it is the newest expansion, and what it allows you to do is now play this game co-op or solo. But you still use the same central card system where you are playing cards to move your characters about the board. It's a really, really clever and simple but satisfying card-driven system. Now, in the Ancients, what happens is you've got this series of minis that are representing ancients, and they have their own minions. And there's different scenarios in the solo game, so depending upon which scenario you play, that's going to be the ancient you face. And you win the game either by finding the ancient crystals out there on the board or by defeating the ancient. And when it's their turn, when it's the ancient's turn, you flip over a card. It's a card-driven AI system, and it's going to tell you what the minions do, and then if an ancient has come out on the board, what the ancient does. They have their own deck of cards. On your turn, you're playing it like you would normally. You're using your deck of cards to maneuver your kind of faction around the board, flipping over tiles, collecting treasure, trying to avoid traps, defeating minions using both melee and ranged attacks. It's a game that I always thought would be great if I could play it solo. Never really thought I could, but then the Ancients came out. Really good. All right, my number 35 is Thunderbirds. Now, Thunderbirds is a riff on the Pandemic system, which is a very, very popular, kind of an evergreen cooperative game. It's the same designer. It works off the same core system as Pandemic. I happen to like Thunderbirds the best of any of the Pandemic-style games because in addition to that core system, it now also has these vehicles. And it adds a new element to the game where you have to utilize these vehicles in the best way to move around the map to kind of deal with these bad things that are happening to defeat the Hood, which is the big bad. It's based off of a IP from, I don't know, the 60s maybe, this kind of puppet show. I remember seeing 1 or 2 episodes of these as a kid, but that's not what got me to enjoy the game. The theme is fine. I don't have anything against the Thunderbirds, but that's not what drew me in. What drew me in is this super satisfying puzzle where you are having to deal with bad things that are happening, but still trying to get things accomplished, moving these vehicles about, using the abilities of the characters you have to their most efficient manner. A really, really satisfying puzzle every time I play it. That is Thunderbirds. All right, at number 34 is a big, lavish production. This is Cloudspire. Cloudspire comes from Chip Theory Games, which are known for these amazing components. Essentially, you've got poker chips and you've got neoprene, and there's a whole lot of both in Cloudspire. Cloudspire is a game that kind of feels like a MOBA and a tower defense game in one. You play as one particular faction that's going to have its own set of chips that are going to represent your different characters. And they all have different abilities and different stats and a whole lot of keywords. So what you're trying to do is defeat an oncoming horde of AI-controlled enemies that are coming towards your faction gate, and you're trying to defeat their faction's gate. And it's done through a series of scenarios. So each scenario is its own kind of discrete puzzle, and they're very challenging. I find them challenging anyway, but it's so satisfying. Now, I will say, there's a bit of an investment that you have to go into in a game like this, where you have to really get to know each faction that you're playing as, because as I said, there's a lot of keywords, there's a lot of stats, there's a lot of things to keep track of. But if you go through the effort of learning how the game plays, it is such a satisfying experience. Cloudspire is a pretty unique game. All right, at number 33 is Under Falling Skies. This is a solo-only game that really kind of replicates the feeling of Space Invaders. If you remember that old school arcade game where you are trying to defend a city from a oncoming horde of alien invaders. And in Under Falling Skies, you're doing this through dice allocation and dice placement. It's a very, very simple system, but very clever. And again, It's a puzzle game. This is very much a puzzle game where you are trying to utilize these dice in the most efficient manner so that you can manipulate the alien invaders to get into particular places where you can then zap them with missiles. Very, very easy to administer what the aliens are going to do, but it's very challenging to figure out what you're going to do. A really, really cool solo game, and one of the solo-only games on this list, Under Falling Skies. All right, at number 32 is Rise of Tribes with the Beasts and Bronze expansion. Now, this is one of those games where, like Wildlands, in the base game, you cannot play it solo. The base game of Rise of Tribes is kind of a, it feels a little bit like a Civilization game where you are building a map that is out there on the central part of the table, and you are growing your tribe, and you're moving your tribe, and you're gaining new abilities. With the Beast and Bronze expansion, you now are facing against an enemy tribe that is trying to do the same things. They're also growing their tribe, and they are moving their tribe, and they are competing to build villages. And so Rise of Tribes is one of my favorite games in general. I never really thought that it would work as a solo game, but the Beast and Bronze expansion makes it a very, very satisfying solo game. That is Beasts and Bronze expansion for the Rise of Tribes. At number 31, the last game on this list is Obsession. Obsession is a game with a really unique theme. If you're familiar with the show Downton Abbey, this feels like Downton Abbey, the board game. You are trying to gain the favor of high-class society, and you're trying to marry some of the most wealthy and well-established members of society. And you're doing this by trying to put on the best events and gain the favor of the upper class. Well, what you're really doing is you are placing out these different workers that are going to allow you to trigger different events. It is such a unique feeling game. It doesn't feel like other kind of worker placement games like this that I've played before. And I think it's one that really is evocative of the theme, especially if you kind of get into it and allow yourself to be drawn into the world that Obsession is playing out there for you. A really unique game that, again, I don't think is getting a whole lot of attention, and I think it should. It's a really, really cool game and a great solo game. That's my number 31, Obsession. All right, well, this is another 10 games down, but there's 30 more games to go. So keep watching the great content we've got coming from the Dice Tower Spring Spectacular, and I hope to see you on my next installment of the Top 50 Solo Games of All Time.